Hey, what's up, everybody? On this week's Sportlight podcast, we talk to Olympic silver medalist and current world champion Rhyan White about swimming. We talk about the price of being an elite athlete. She shares some opinions on social media and why she tries to stay away from it. She talks about her training and her nutrition. It's just so much. Eyes up, do the work. Just an incredible message from her that will inspire everyone and leave you feeling like you just want to be a better person and do more for other people. She is just an elite person, not only an elite athlete.
Welcome to the Sportlight podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
Well, everybody, we are here with Rhyan White, United States Olympian. And Rhyan, I'm going to read a little bit of your accomplishments here because this is super cool. 2020 Tokyo Olympics, you swam the 100 and 200 backstroke there, participated in the 400 medley relay that won the silver medal there in Tokyo. You've swam at Alabama in the SEC. Now this is your 5th year because you had that extra COVID year to participate. But this is the coolest for me, I think. Well, Olympics is cool. All this is cool. But we are talking to the fastest person in the world when it comes to the 200-meter short course backstroke. You're the defending world champion when it comes to that. So that's pretty cool. Not many times have I ever spoken to the fastest person in the world at anything. So thank you so much for joining us today, Rhyan.
Yeah, of course. I'm super happy to talk to you guys and tell you about my experiences. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to lead off with a question. I did a little study up on you, read your bio. How do you go from cheerleader, tumbler, and swimmer to Olympic swimmer? I'm just curious, in your mind, it sounds like you did a lot of things growing up, but there must have been a moment when it clicked for you that you would have the opportunity to really be an elite swimmer. When did you come to that realization and start seriously training with swimming?
So cheer was always just something that I loved to do. I started swimming, my sister and I loved to compete against each other, and she did cheerleading. We both tumbled together. It was mostly just for fun. I think my dream was always to go to the Olympics for swimming. But I would say maybe around my senior year of high school is when I would say that I realized that I could really do something. It was around the time that my class is committing to go to college, and just going through that process and hearing all these coaches kind of hype me up to myself. I think that's when I realized that I was looking for a coach and a partner to help me accomplish this dream of mine that had kind of turned into a goal. Yeah.
That's a cool way to say it. Yeah, a dream that turned into a goal, right? A little girl dreamed it. Now you realize, okay, here's someone who can help me achieve my goal. And so you chose Alabama. How did you come to that realization?
I talked to a few different schools when I got down to the serious committing process and recruiting process. I liked all of them, but I don't know. I really loved the team here, and I thought that surrounding myself with these types of people would help me more than just between me and a coach. And I committed here. One of my old club coaches coached here during my process of recruiting, so it was nice to know that I was going to have somebody that knew my coach from home and knew my parents, someone that would make Alabama feel a little bit more like home. So yeah, that's why I ended up committing. And then actually he left. All of our coaches, we had a complete coaching change at the end of my freshman year. And it's so weird how life works out, but I really think that the coach that I'm working with now is the coach that is meant to be my coach. And I think I'm meant to be one of his swimmers. It was really hard to wrap my head around the fact that like all of our coaches were leaving, but I just see it now as a blessing. So, yeah.
That's cool. I think part of the reason you went to Alabama is because your dad thought if you did that maybe Jack could go there and play football, your younger brother.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
I'm sure that came up. I know we have a bunch of questions that we're going to get into with you, Ryan, but I just want to, before we go too far, you're fairly new to Especially for Athletes, meaning that you didn't grow up with this like a lot of kids that we work with in Utah might, because we work with their club or we work with their high school. It wasn't part of your school. Still isn't, unfortunately. We need to get into your old high school, but you were aware of it because of your brother Jack, who I mentioned, who was as a football player. But it really wasn't until just the last year or so that your dad kind of made you a little bit more aware of things. Then you and I had a discussion once, and I sent you a copy of our book, and you kind of started looking into Especially for Athletes a little bit. I'm curious, you wear a wristband like we do that says "Eyes Up, do the work." There it is. Yeah, showing it off. Thank you for wearing that. It's awesome for us to have an Olympian supporting our cause. But to you, and we didn't even prep you with this question when we sent you some of the questions we might ask you, but I'm curious, since you've looked through that book and thought about that wristband, Eyes Up, do the work, or the message of Especially for Athletes, the Sportlight, which you are absolutely in at a super high level right now. What does that mean to you? What does that phrase or that idea of living with your eyes up and doing the work mean to you?
Yeah, I am fairly new to it. I think something that I've learned from my dad, and it kind of ties back to E4A, is just serving others. He's always looked for people that are in need of help and finding very creative ways to help them. And I think that, like, just each day as I'm going to practice, I'm more aware of how my teammates are feeling, how I'm feeling, or even my coach, who I think a lot of times the coach-athlete relationship is like they have the power and they kind of decide how things are going to go, but sometimes they need help too. And I think just me having eyes up in my head and like on my wrist, it just reminds me to look around and see if someone else is in need of help. And I really appreciate it because it gives me a different perspective on how other people are feeling and how things that they're going through affect them.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, let's dive into the nitty gritty now. What's a typical day life like for you when you're training? In the middle of I know you have off times or times that maybe aren't as intense as others. You probably don't have a lot of off times, but in the most intense weeks of training, what's a typical day like for an Olympic swimmer like you?
Well, I can just start at the beginning. I have doubles Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So those are usually the harder days of the week. Tuesday and Thursday, we just swim in the afternoon, which is nice. I get to sleep in. But yeah, like on Monday, I would wake up maybe like an hour before my practice, which is at 6:30. So wake up at 5:30. I like to show up to practice awake. I don't like some of the people, they come and they're a little sleepy still. So I like to be ready when I get there. I live maybe 3 minutes from the pool, but I usually get there about 30 minutes early. So I like to roll out, stretch a little bit, just see how I'm feeling before I get in. We swim for about an hour and a half, and then I head over to the dining hall with some of my friends for breakfast. I go to the library sometimes, or I just do my homework at home. I don't actually have in-person class this year. It's all online, which is really nice. Then I take a nap like every day. It's definitely a priority to get my rest. And then the afternoon practice is when we get hit pretty hard. It's usually like a little more than 2 hours. And from there, I go straight over to the weight room. where we lift for like another hour and a half ish. It takes me a little longer. I like to go slow. I like to do things my way and make sure I'm doing them, getting the most out of the exercises that we're doing. And I typically stay after too to stretch or do an extra ab workout, something like that. Yeah, and then I just head to dinner, back to the dining hall. It's really convenient that we have that. And then, yeah, I typically just come home, kind of try to relax, calm down, do laundry, or like I really, really like reading. So I just read at night usually. So yeah, that's like a Monday. So
Wow.
that happens Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
You mentioned sleep. What time do you go to bed? If you're waking up at 5:30, do you have a regiment where you like make sure you get your sleep?
I try to be in my bed by around 10. I would say probably don't fall asleep until like 10:30. Depending on what book I'm reading, it might be a little bit later. But I'm not super strict about it. I don't like to overthink things, so that's just something. I mean, I go to bed pretty early, I would say, to some people, but I'm also like a night person, so kind of like sometimes that gets hard. Yeah, I would say prioritize napping over going to bed early. Yeah.
Well, that nap is important. You know, that is, I mean, that's something that any elite level athlete is who's talked to a doctor before, or even a sports psychologist, they'll talk about the benefits of sleep, but even taking a nap, you know, during the day, and how important that is to get your rest. So what you're saying though, is you don't spend 4 or 5 hours a day on Instagram and scrolling through random,
No.
You're not on your phone for 4 hours a day or playing video games for 6 hours a day, huh?
No video games. I don't have Instagram on my phone most of the time. I usually, if I'm getting ready to post something, I'll download it, check, make sure there aren't any like weird comments. But other than that, like it's not on my phone right now. I don't have TikTok. Yeah, that's not really something. I'll get lost in it. So
yeah, I love it. It's focus, right? It's priorities. It's having your eye on the prize and knowing that things that are potential distractions to that are not worth your time and energy. And that's why you're elite.
Yeah.
I hope all you young kids and parents heard that last little bit right there. We say all the time, Ryan, you can't out of one side of your mouth say you want to be an elite level athlete or student, and then out of the other side of your mouth say that you spend 4 hours a day on video games or social media. You can't do both. You know, something has to give. So what advice would you have for kids who are coming up as swimmers, or not even swimming? What advice would you have for somebody that wants to be great at something? We'll use sports, obviously, as this is directed at athletes. You know, why do you think social media, or what other things are there that you saw growing up that were maybe distractions? And when did you realize I have to cut some of those things out of my life if I'm going to do this?
I think with social media, it kind of puts people into a box. And in high school, I used Instagram a lot more. And I would see what my friends were posting. And I think it's just a way for this time that people are trying to fit in. And I think it's hard fitting in, and it's hard when you don't fit in or you want to. And I think using social media creates a lot of comparison between people. And I don't know if this is as heavy in guys or boys, but at least for me, if I'm on Instagram, I'm constantly comparing myself to other people and other posts, and not necessarily likes, or comments, or like these things you see on the screen, but it's just seeing other people, and people are only posting what they're having fun doing, and they make their life look so just like so easy and so happy, when I just think everyone's going through things on their own. And that's something that I've struggled with, is like falling into this spiral of comparing. Yeah, I think also, like, not everybody thinks the way the athletes think. And we have to be somewhat obsessed with what we're working toward. And I think that can fall into other categories without it being our choice. So we can obsess over comparing ourselves or obsess over likes or comments, like views and shares, all these things. And I think that like being obsessed in this way is good for our sport, but it can be bad in other parts of our life. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. You have that personality, that competitive, addictive personality. You hear athletes oftentimes fall into traps of addiction, and it's the same. That's the same sort of characteristic that drove them to be addicted to the weight room or be addicted to working out and training and becoming great as an athlete can also be the same thing that drags them into trouble, right? That obsession, like you said. And yeah, I've actually never thought of that with social media, Ryan, that same obsession that you have to be great and to want to win and be successful could also hurt you when you go on social media and you maybe become obsessed with not being the looking or acting or feeling like your social media feed is impressive. The likes that you're getting aren't as much as somebody else. And now it becomes a double-edged sword. That's the negative side of it. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So you said something in your previous answer that I listened to a few other podcasts that you've been on, and you said, I try not to overthink things. And I heard you talking about how you personally don't like to hyperanalyze your times and things like that, but you just like to go in and concentrate on effort and having a good swim without obsessing over times. That sounds almost like something that is a belief you have as an athlete that helps you to perform at the level you perform at. Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. When I go into a meet, I try my best not to have expectations. I trust my training. I trust myself and my coach. And I think that each day I work toward, giving myself confidence and treating my mind the right way that fits me. I don't like to think about times. I almost never know my best times. And a lot of my friends or just people that I talk to about swimming, they might know someone's times. And it's not that I'm not a swim fan, but I just don't keep up with these things. I think I do best when I stay in between my lane lines. So if I start thinking about times and then I don't go a certain time, I think it can be hard for me to understand why my training didn't work or why I slept all this time before leading into the meet and this kind of thing. So yeah, I just focus on what's happening between my lane lines. I work on my breakouts. I have a kick count, a stroke count. I just prefer to think of it this way. Another thing that kind of pertains to times is my coach is always saying to keep the highs low and the lows high. This is just, if I have an amazing swim, it's important to me and to him to teach me that it doesn't define me. And if I have a terrible swim, it doesn't define me. And there's always something coming next. So just trying to keep a steady rhythm to what I'm doing and focusing more on that instead of the times. That's something that I really, really like.
That's it's a different take on the stay in your lane, saying that's often thrown around. Yeah. But what I hear you saying, we often talk to our athletes about, look, you'll be a lot better of an athlete and a lot better of a person if you focus on those things that are within your control. And it sounds to me like what's within your control is what happens in that one lane of the race. If you start worrying about the other 7 lanes, then that gets in your head. But you're talking about kick counts and stroke counts and trusting your training. And I think that has a lot of life application, that sometimes when we start thinking outside of our lane and try to get beyond our training, we start to feel despair because then we're worrying about all these things that we can't affect anyway.
Yeah. Definitely things that I focus on are the things that I can control. Like what someone else does in their training, what they do during their race. It's just, that's them and that's best for them. But I just think that what I'm doing is best for me. So I focus on those things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ryan, I thought that I might be an Olympic swimmer one day too. And then I swam to one end of the pool and back and realized how hard it was to even get to the one end. And I almost drowned. So I gave that up when I was about 8. But for those of us who are like me, that swimming one end and back is hard, don't know a lot about swimming. You said stroke count and kick count. Like, tell us a little bit more about that. I'm just curious to know what, first of all, you're not counting both at the same time, are you? And then also what, like, that's how smart I am, Ryan.
That would be pretty talented if that were the case, you know, like on this side of my head, I'm counting my strokes. On this side, I'm counting my kicks.
Yeah, maybe that's why I can't swim so well. I forgot that trick. Anyway, but what's that like? Like your stroke count, you're trying to, obviously you have a number from practice, I assume, and then you're trying to stay within that when you race, or explain more about that just so we understand what you're doing in the water.
Yeah, so when we race, there's like a little marker on the lane line. Most of it's like red, but then there's one like black marker. It's at the 15-meter mark, so you can't stay underwater past that without getting disqualified. So I'm like a very leg-driven swimmer, and doing backstroke, it's like a lot of underwater. So my kick count is usually 12. So I do 12 underwaters to get to the 15-meter mark. So when I'm swimming like a 2-back long course, I'll do 12 underwaters and then have like my breakout strokes, and I like start counting as soon as I start swimming. It's usually around 18 by the time I get to that wall. So when we are in practice, if we're working back end speed, that's what we call it. It's like the second 50 of 100. So I'll do my 12 kicks and count to 18. And most of the time, like, I've gone to a point where I can like look at my coach, and if I know that I hit the count, then I can say like my time within a second. And this is just something, I don't even know if anyone else does this that is like at the level that I'm at. It's just something that I like to do. But if I know that if I did like one extra stroke or one less stroke or a cycle less, then my time's going to be a little bit off. But I think it's just like with repetition, that's why I've gotten to like know what my time will be. So that's what the kick count and stroke count is. And usually it's a little different when you race, just because of the excitement and adrenaline. My kick count is always the same, but stroke counts are different just depending on like how I'm feeling at the end of a race or, that kind of thing. So.
That's cool stuff. I'll have you know, Ryan, in the last Olympics, when you were swimming, I had my whole family, and I was literally on my couch jumping as you were swimming, and my kids were going nuts, and so were your family, by the way, and most of the state of Utah. That was, a lot of people knew about you, and we're in your corner, and we can't wait for the next Olympics to see you get after it again. So, well, let's dive a little bit more in. I know Shad had asked you or sent you a couple questions that we wanted to really sort of get into that we think would help some of the athletes that are listening to this. Shad, why don't you fire away some of those at her? And Ryan, if you have anything along this, that you want to expand more on, or that you feel like, hey, I want to tell that 13-year-old girl this or whatever, feel free to say whatever you feel.
All right.
Awesome. So we love to think of the athlete that maybe doesn't have the resources that other athletes have, that love to swim, have some talent in swimming, but maybe their parents don't have the resources to join a club, or they're where they are, they can't join a club. It's just too far away from other swimmers. And even high school swimmers who, you've trained at an Olympic level, right? So you probably learned some things at that level that you wish you could go back and tell your 13-year-old self, like, hey, let me give you some advice. So I'd like to fire a few questions at you like that. If you could go back to a high school Ryan White that's 14 years old, just starting your high school swim career, and give yourself some training advice as far as like, here's what I would try to do. Here's a week regiment for what to do in the off season. Let's start there. What would you say, like, yeah, this is the training I would try to do in the off season if you want to be an elite high school swimmer?
Well, we don't exactly have an off season. We have kind of 2 seasons throughout the year. But I would say as a high school swimmer, the short course season is a lot more important. So in the summer is when a lot of people will take time off. Mm-hmm. If you're wanting to get to more of an elite level, I don't think it's a good idea to take the summers off. I think it's really important to stay disciplined through the summer, and that's a really good opportunity to give yourself, because other people will be taking time off, and it's just kind of a chance to find an edge on other people. I think like a lot of people might take Fridays off because it's the end of the week and they're tired, or Saturday morning, and these are the most important practices of the week, because so many people will go on Monday with this great attitude and attack the week hard, and by Friday they're getting tired. So I think one thing I would say is like really take advantage of those Friday, Saturday practices, and so much so that you'll have a better rest going into the next week. And I think just staying consistent with that, and staying consistent with showing up to practice, showing up awake and ready to train, that would probably be like my first piece of advice. Yeah.
That's really cool advice. I mean, that's applicable across all sports, right? Championships are usually won when no one is watching. Champions are revealed when everyone is watching, but they're won in those early mornings and on those Fridays and Saturdays. That's when they're actually won. And so that's awesome advice. What would a typical, and I guess some kids maybe have more access than I think they do, but if you were to give a 14, 15-year-old, let's say that they had a club that practiced Monday through Thursday and they wanted to do some things on Friday, Saturday, like what's a typical good workout for a swimmer when they're trying to progress? How do they push themselves? How do they advance?
That's a really good question. When I think I was a sophomore, I begged my club coach to let me come to morning practice. And I'm so grateful that he didn't let me. But we came up with a compromise of rowing on like an erg. So that is something that so many great swimmers do. Just some sort of cardio. Now I train on a rowing machine still. And I also use like it's called an assault bike. But those are things that you can change, like the power output that the machine gives you. You can look at like how many calories you're burning throughout it, and just having different workouts that last maybe 45 to 50 minutes. And even in those workouts, my coach would give me a day where I did 7 times of like I think my goal time that year was like a 55. So I would go 7 times sprinting a 55, like a 55 second. And even when I was doing that, I was visualizing my 100 back just in the last 15 seconds. Like I know that's when I'm pushing off the wall, and I'm counting to like, I think at that time my kick count was probably closer to 8. So in the last 15 seconds, like I'm counting to 8 in my head, and I'm seeing like the flags pass over my eyes. It's kind of, I think this is something that not many people would be able to do or think about doing when they're working out. But I'm almost always visualizing my races in everything that I'm doing. If I'm going to the weight room and the set has like 12 reps of something, I'm visualizing myself kick every rep. It's really, I don't know why I do it. Sometimes it can be bothersome because sometimes I'll be trying to fall asleep counting my breaths, and I'll end up counting to 16 or 18, and I'm like, okay, I just went 50 back. But yeah, that's something to say like rowing, assault bike, any form of cardio, that's something that's going to be super beneficial.
So the 55 seconds, is that because that's about the time of your race? Is that what you're saying? Like,
Yeah, high school. Yeah, in high school, I feel like my goal time was probably around 55 or 56. Mm-hmm. It's a bit faster now, but yeah. So if I was to do that workout now, it would be my time now is at 50 points, so 50.0. So I would probably do this with like holding 49 or going 49 seconds for this many reps. Yeah, I think I would take probably like 4 minutes between each 55 seconds. It's just really good for, I think like the visualizing helps. It makes you kind of almost feel like you're in the water when you're not. But yeah.
5 seconds difference from your goal now to what it was in high school.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time when you think about it, but it makes sense. It's funny. I was texting yesterday with the dad of a quarterback in the NFL, and we were texting about his son and how he was doing. And he mentioned to me how he still needs a lot of work. And I thought, wow, he's doing pretty good, but it makes sense. And I see it with quarterbacks that, like your brother Jack, who I did some work with. The very best high school quarterback you might watch him play and just think, holy cow, he is so good. He can do so much. But next to an NFL quarterback, or even a really good college quarterback, but a college quarterback next to an NFL quarterback, the jump in just the improvement that happens, the really elite level athletes, it's crazy how much better the elite level Olympians or pro athletes are than those really good high school athletes. And so I guess what I'm leading to is, how do you get, like, if your goal's 50 now, like, where's the bar? I mean, you're not going to get to 45, right? Like 50 is the goal, but what, like, realistically, where do you think you can get to?
I don't really know that I would say a specific time, because I feel like that's kind of cutting myself off. My time now is a 50.06, and I did that 2 years ago. So my goal time this year is 48.0. I just decided that I didn't go best time last year, so I'm skipping 49. That's just what I wanted to do.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I don't think I would give like a time that is like never reachable.
I love that you said that, Ryan. Like, that's so awesome. Let me tell you why. I'm sure Shad thought the same thing, but in our book, our first book, we talked about focusing on your best rather than the best. And the point being is that the best is set by somebody, right? Like, the best is whatever the second place finisher's time is. I've got to be just a 1/10 of a second better than that, and I'm the best, right? I win the gold. But it might not be your best. Like, you might have been 2 seconds faster than that, right? But you set a bar, you set a ceiling at what the time needed to be. And we do that a lot in life. We say, well, I need to be all state. If I can just be all state, then I've reached it. Or I need to go to college, or I need to have a shot at the Olympic trials. I want to go to the Olympic trials and just get there. And we set these, and once we get there, it's easy for us to say, okay, I've done it. I've reached it. And then, well, now what, right? Like, instead of taking that attitude, like you say, of, I don't know, maybe I can get, like, I almost saw like some fire in your eyes when I said, like, you can't get to 45, right? Like, you kind of, in your eyes, you were like, hell yes, I can. I'm going to get to 45. Like, you were like looking fire through me. I love it. Like, that's the kind of attitude of, I'm not going to set a bar for myself. Maybe I can, right? Like, I love that. That's, sorry for the language. I get fired up talking to elite athletes like you. It's awesome. That was a great answer. Well done.
Thank you.
That's really cool. So, Ryan, this is something that you've had access to the best coaches and nutritionists. And I would sometimes as we approach, and it's not just swimming, like sometimes it's our cross country, it's, track athletes and these endurance athletes. Could you tell us about your nutrition? And I know it's probably different for everybody, but how do you approach a meet nutrition wise? Like, is there things that they have you eat a few days before, or do you try not to overthink that as well? I would just be really curious. How do you make sure your body has the fuel it needs to perform at the level that you want it to?
Going into meets is honestly not much different than the way that I eat, like throughout the year. There are some things that we can do or that I can eat like before meet, but it is sort of part of the overthinking. I like to go into a meet with things that my body is used to. So I do have a nutritionist here at the school, and we have the dining hall, which is really convenient. I actually cook at home a lot. At first I was bad, but I actually love cooking. I think it's super fun, and it's I'm fairly introverted, so it's a really nice way for me to recharge, just having my mind like focused on one thing and like being alone during that time. But yeah, I don't think I eat much different at a meet versus throughout the year. We have this thing like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before a meet. It's called taper, which is when we do much less yardage with similar intensity to our like heavy training. Just to give our bodies, it kind of works like a slingshot effect on our body. It lets you like recover, and then you hit your taper during the meet, and that's when you're able to swim faster than you are during the season. And during this time, since we are like training much less yards, I don't eat as much throughout the day or like as many calories, I guess. But I don't really count it or focus too much on like the numbers of that. But yeah, I think I like really prioritize drinking a protein drink after practice every day, after every practice. So I actually drink sometimes like 2 to 3 a day. We have cherry juices. It's just like a tiny bottle of cherry juice, which just helps with like recovery, and it has like natural melatonin in it. So I usually drink it before I go to bed. And also I drink beet juice. Like sometimes I drink it in the form of like a powder and mix it in water, but we also have like beet juice, little like shot bottles, I guess. And that's just like, it's good for your red blood cells with the oxygen, and it helps your muscles. I wouldn't say like grow, but the fibers in your muscles are able to circulate the blood a little bit better. Think. So those are like some of the things that I like definitely do every day. I don't like cut out anything. I eat ice cream. It's my favorite dessert. And I think it's like really hard for me to cut things out, because then I just want to eat them more, I guess. So I do prioritize eating healthy and eating well. And it helps when I eat at home, because sometimes like going out or going to the dining hall, like you don't know what they're putting in the foods that they're making. And sometimes they're like more salty than what I would like. But yeah.
And you said something that others brought it. We had Diljit Taylor on our podcast, and she is the BYU's cross-country coach, and they're top 10 team in the country right now. She said something interesting that you mentioned there that might be good for all athletes to hear. That she said a lot of times we talk about fueling for workouts or for meets. She said by far we have found that the most important thing is the recovery meal after a workout, that is what your body needs. That's the thing that has the biggest impact. And you said you always have a shake after your workouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm super lucky. We have, like, at our facility, we have a fridge, and it's full of, like, lunch meat, yogurts, protein drinks. It's like always stocked, and we also have like snacks that don't go in the fridge and stuff. But Usually as I'm showing up to practice, I have like a yogurt with some fruit and like peanut butter, something light. And then, like right after practice, we also have our like recovery room. Our training room is like literally the doors on deck. So I will like run to the fridge sometimes, grab a protein drink, like a Core Power, or we have Gatorade ones. And then I'll just go back and sit in the cold tub or the hot tub or do my Normatec or cupping. And it's sort of a habit now because it's so convenient, which I'm lucky. But yeah, that's definitely something. And we have the same thing in the weight room too. So I will like drink a protein drink on the way to the dining hall for dinner.
That's cool.
When you walked out during the Olympics, what was that like? Representing your country, seeing all the other athletes, just that, like, was there a realization that, holy cow, I'm doing this? Or were you able to walk with the team when they came out? You weren't, like, I know some athletes come later in the next week. Were you able to walk with the other Olympians, U.S. Olympians?
For the opening ceremonies, because swimming's like the first week, they encourage us not to go to the opening ceremonies. It's like 6 hours of walking. So I actually didn't go.
Yeah.
We like all got dressed up in our opening ceremonies clothes and like did our own little thing as a swim team. But I was pretty bummed that I missed out on that. But I've heard from other swimmers like that have done it in previous years that it really takes a toll on their body.
Yeah.
So unfortunately.
What was it like being in there and hearing the crowd and things cheer for you? Can you hear everybody when you're underwater racing? Like, you feel the energy? When you're counting your kicks and your strokes at the same time
and listening to the crowd.
Yeah, you have a lot going on in your head.
She's going through like she has that chemistry final, and she's like,
"Am I breathing?" Yeah.
There's definitely like an energy you can feel. Since there weren't spectators, just we had like the different swim, like every country had like their teams there watching, like trying to make noise. There is like an energy you can feel while you're swimming, and it's just like adrenaline. It feels really nice. And like, like people are cheering for you, people are watching you. I think that the Olympics in Tokyo were a lot different than others would feel, just because of that. It's like a lot more of the spectators are watching on TV. So it was a little, I would say it was kind of anticlimactic in that sense. Like, you expect all of these, like there's seats everywhere, they're just empty.
Yeah, that's true. You were there during obviously a very unique Olympics. Do you have to take that into consideration with, I know other athletes, you talk about all the time breathing and different things, because you can't simulate, a game, or in your case, it's impossible to simulate an Olympic or a world champion race at practice. The energy, the adrenaline, you have to take that into consideration when you're breathing and even things like kick counts and things like that, because you're so worked up and hyped up for the moment. How do you go about keeping yourself really present, knowing that that adrenaline's got to be just crazy inside of you at that moment?
I think when we are at these meets with a lot of spectators, I typically don't focus on the amount of people in the stands. I got like actually really good advice from one of the coaches at the Olympics. It was before my first race, and I was so nervous, and she just like pulled me aside, and she's like, okay, just tell me, like, get it out of your system, like talk about it. And so I just told her how nervous I was, and she talked about how there weren't spectators there and that there should have been, and that she wanted me to feel how nervous I would have felt if there were spectators there. And then she just pointed out to me, like, the only spectators that matter are the ones that are in your front row. So this is something that I've taken with me to every meet since, which is like my family, my best friends. It's a very small group of people. So that's something that I would say, like, I focus more on when there are a lot of spectators and trying to recreate the hype of the meet. I'm still visualizing like what I would do in the situation of being like at Worlds or at the Olympics again. Because I think like spectators and the energy, it's good to feel the energy in a positive way, but it can also be just like noise that I don't like focus on. So
yeah, that's great. I'm gonna write that down when we get off this. That was great.
Hey, who's in your front row? You know, because you could start worrying about what everyone's going to think. But, you know, win, lose, medal, non-medal, those in your front row know all the work that it took for you to get there. And they are going to cry tears of joy for you regardless of the finish, because they know the true price. So that's really cool. I mean, that's one. We say this a lot, but whenever we meet with an elite athlete, sometimes they just say these things. You've said a number of them today, but they stick with us forever, and it'll be part of our presentation moving forward. So Ryan, you made a comment that I would love to pick your brain about when it comes to our mission, and especially for athletes and helping other people. We encourage, as you know, athletes to use their Sportlight, that extra attention that's given to them as an athlete, to help and lift those around them. And you made the comment, and I've gathered this from some of the things that you've said, like, I go home, I eat, and I read a book, you know, and you said, I'm an introvert. And so sometimes very well-known athletes, it's super easy to be an extrovert because everyone wants to talk to you, and so it's easy to be outgoing and things like that. But I'm always interested when we could talk to an athlete that has the values you have, because you really do want to lift your team and lift those around you, but you're an introvert. And what would you say to an athlete that is listening to one of our presentations and we're trying to pump them up? Eyes up, do the work, you know, see people that might need you and do the work to lift them and to help them. And they're sitting there thinking, man, this isn't as easy for me. I'm a little bit of an introvert. What advice would you give to still use that Sportlight to do good, even though you are naturally an introverted person?
Have you seen the movie We Bought a Zoo?
Mm-hmm.
There's a part in it, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but it is something that I think about. It just like is 10 seconds of courage. So I think, although I'm introverted, I'm fairly outgoing. But when it's something that scares me or intimidates me, if it is seeing someone, and like as a freshman, sophomore, I might not think I have as much of a voice, but I really think it just takes like maybe 4 or 5 seconds of courage to start this conversation and say like, hey, I noticed you're doing this. Like, can I help you do it differently? And I think even though I am introverted, I try my best to put myself in uncomfortable situations like that. And honestly, I think it gives me more confidence in a way, which is so weird how like our mind is like also connected. But yeah, I would say like it's important to be uncomfortable, and not only in talking to people or making yourself more outgoing or faking it to be outgoing. I think that being uncomfortable in these situations prepares you for being uncomfortable in a situation that might have a lot of pressure in your sport.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great answer. Well, Ryan, you make us feel fired up. I'm excited. I'm motivated to get going today talking to you. Just, I can't believe the maturity that you have. Holy cow, for a college student, knowing what most college kids are doing on a typical Tuesday morning or afternoon, like, and knowing what you're doing and what your goals are and where your focus is and what you've already done and been through, but not just as an athlete, but just the way that you're approaching everything, your time in the Sportlight, your example that you are to so many other people. And, I hope that that we're obviously honored to have you as a representative of especially for athletes. you're the perfect athlete for what we're trying to push, the way you live your life, the way you're going about your goals, but also the way you are out of the water, and just in the community. And so, we're fans of yours, and I hope, every time you're in there busting your tail to get a little faster, working hard, that that a lot of people are behind you and cheering for you, and your front row is getting busy. It's filling up. And we wish you the best of luck as you continue to train, and we're with you. And so is the E4A family. Keep it up. We're proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me all these questions. It's really nice to say some of this stuff out loud. I think it reminds me of some of my values and the way I do things, and it's reassuring for sure. So
awesome.
Well, hey, thank you, Ryan, so much.
Yeah, thank you too.
Wow, Shad, I told you when we had that conversation with Ryan a couple weeks ago that she was willing to come on and talk with us, that she would be a good interview for the podcast, but I didn't believe it would be that good.
She is an amazing person. There's 4 or 5 things that she shared there that were just so powerful. To stay within my lane, that has so much application in life, not worrying about all those lanes outside of our control, but just keeping it focused in there. What did she say in that episode that's just really going to stick with you?
Well, obviously the attention, the focus level, but also that she doesn't take herself or the situation too seriously. She's very in control of what's in control. Does that make sense? When she said, what other people, what their goals are, what they race, their times, that's not in my control. I have my time that I want to hit, and I'm just trying to hit that, and I really, really enjoyed, you obviously heard me get pretty animated when I tried to set the bar at a certain time, and she kind of looked at me like, how dare you? I might get that time. I'm not setting a limit on myself. That to me just showed the whole just personality of her and why she's not just an Olympian, but she has medaled and she's going to medal in Paris in 2 years from now.
Absolutely. The other thing that really stuck out to me is when we asked about her typical day, and she talked about reading books, and then she talked about how she stays away from social media because she doesn't want to get sucked into the trap of comparing herself to others. And that was a pretty profound moment and great advice to young athletes and young people in general who just want to be more successful in life. Too many nowadays are getting sucked into that trap of comparison in social media, and it's becoming damaging to them. And that was pretty profound to hear a Olympic athlete who could go out on social media and get tons of attention, I'm sure, but realizing it's not good for her mentally and for her goals to get sucked into that trap.
Well, the self-awareness and the maturity to recognize that, and the humility, right? To say, no, I could fall for that. I could be a victim to that. Instead of saying, no, not me, I'm good, other people do it. She knew that, no, I'm pretty obsessive. So in fact, that's the word she used. And I know that same characteristic that drives me to be as elite as I can be as a swimmer might also drive me to find problems if I dive into the social media world of look at me and I'm cooler than you world. And the self-awareness, and then the dedication to say, I'm not even going to give that the chance to entertain me. I'm not going to go there because I've got my mind set on make what's most important. And these are just distractions to her. And so she's not even going to entertain it. That's the kind of, when we say eyes up and have your mind set on what's most important and then do the work, that's exactly what it is in reaching your goal. She just explained it perfectly.
Yeah, that was awesome. Great interview. Wow, what a great ambassador of the country and of especially for athletes and of all these wonderful principles. So thank you everyone for joining the Sportlight podcast. Please like this, share this, discuss this with teams and with your own children. And this one is a great one. So keep your eyes up and do the work.
This has been the Sportlight podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.